Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on achieving security and compliance in 2021 with a Microsoft First approach. Thank you very much for joining us. It's also my pleasure to kick off the webinar now, and I'll start with just giving you a bit of background and introducing the presenters. So this webinar is entitled Achieving Security and Compliance in 2021 with a Microsoft First approach, and it's presented by Adriaan Bekker, who's Technical Director at Softwerx, and it's also presented by Alan Calder, who's Founder and Executive Chairman of IT Governance. Just a bit of context, 2020 saw the rise of more cyber threats and compliance issues than ever before. And today you'll learn from Europe's compliance experts, IT Governance, as well as the UK's leading Microsoft security specialists, Softwerx. Softwerx have been Microsoft Gold partners for over 20 years and have some deep industry experience. And we're very fortunate to be partnering with IT Governance on the webinar today. At the end of the webinar, you'll come away with a clear view of the latest compliance risks and requirements for your business. You'll also discover 6 steps to a streamlined compliance journey for your organization by adopting a Microsoft First approach. So just a little bit about Adriaan. Adriaan Bekker is Technical Director at Softwerx, and he's got over 20 years experience working with Microsoft and over 10 years working at the C-level. This extensive experience means he's really got the insight and ability to bridge that gap between technical, commercial, and compliance requirements. Alan Calder, he's Founder and Executive Chairman of IT Governance, as I mentioned before. And IT Governance is a leading global provider in cyber risk and privacy management solutions. Alan is the internationally acknowledged cybersecurity expert and a leading author on information security and IT governance issues. So Alan, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm now excited to just present a bit more about what we'll cover today. So first, Adriaan's going to look at the latest compliance challenges in 2021. Next, Alan will give you an overview of the current cyber threat landscape. Alan will then go on to explain the most effective steps to address cyber threats. And after that, Adriaan will cover the 6 steps to achieve compliance with a Microsoft First approach. We'll then wrap up with some next steps, some key takeaways, and of course, time for your questions. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Adriaan Bekker from Softwerx to talk about the compliance challenges in 2021. Adriaan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you very much, Alan, for joining us and everyone that's on this webinar today. And hopefully what we will cover today you'll find useful and understand how Microsoft has changed to help you with compliance, but also what is the requirements and risk, as we mentioned earlier. So if we want to start with some of the challenges we faced, and I think the challenges just keeps happening all of the time from various organizations. It is really hard to stay up to date with all the changes that's happening around regulatory bodies around the world. Yes, in the UK we have certain regulations, but a lot of our customers, a lot of organizations deal in a number of markets, not just in the UK, and they have to ensure that they stay up to date with these regulations. We've also found that when we spoke to the industry, that 65% of firms struggled with GDPR. They struggled with having that in-house capabilities on how can I achieve compliance? How do we monitor it? How do we maintain it? What can we do to improve those processes? And we're finding that this is probably the biggest challenge. Even though GDPR or UK GDPR has been in place for a while, organizations are still really struggling on how can we demonstrate that we are compliant and how do we implement these processes. And what is interesting as well, as part of the survey, Microsoft has found that 32% of organizations spend more than half a day a week just amending reports, which is, again, time-consuming, disjointed, no single approach, because all of these projects or reports needs to be hand-sewn. So what we want to try and do by talking about a Microsoft First approach is that Microsoft, for the customers who uses Office 365 or Azure, has built in a number of compliance features already. And what's quite interesting, up to a few years ago, Microsoft has been seen purely as a software provider around office productivity from an organization's point of view. But over the last few years, they have actually converted themselves into security and compliance as well. So they're one of the leading providers around security, and by having all of those views into your environment, understanding your security, understanding what's happening in your business, they can help you achieve the compliance in your organizations. And what's quite interesting, when we speak to organizations, very few has actually realized how things has changed over the last 5 years and how much Microsoft is investing. And what is goes quite hand in hand, even if you're doing Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001, all of those processes, all of those reports to show you that you are complying with those regulations can be demonstrated via Microsoft using their built-in compliance. And I will state at this stage, you do need to have the right license, because I do get the questions always, do we have access to it? No, you need the right license. And that's how Microsoft make money, or as I like to call it, the Microsoft tax. So from a point of view, what has Microsoft built in? They've created a process on how we should be achieving our compliance. Firstly is assess what information you have in the organization, understand what type of data you have in the organization, then actually protect that information. Make sure that it's secure. Make sure that you don't accidentally have some data loss or data leakages. And then lastly, respond. How do we actually deal with a subject access request? Or we need to demonstrate that we're following certain processes and procedures, hence running some auditing process. And what we will do today is run you through some of these features from a point of view to help you understand how Microsoft achieve these various areas. And I think we need to understand the compliance is just growing, and it's not slowing down at all from a point of view. If you look at the various industries, for example, the regulatory requests is going through the roof. Basically, what we have seen is with e-discovery, 100% year-on-year growth, and that is not just around subject access request, it's around HR, request for information, investigating breaches or potential breaches. We're also seeing that government organization wants to see more supervision. They would like to see more information. And we're also seeing a lot of more litigation across these where information is required. And the demand, irrelevant of which industry you're in, is getting bigger. That compliance is actually key and core to your organization. Without that compliance element, you are running in the dark. You are just, it's almost, as I say, you're hoping for the best. You've got to have those procedures in, and no more is it good enough just to say, well, we've got a policy. You actually got to demonstrate how are we achieving that compliance? How can we demonstrate how we are staying compliant? Can we find the information when we need it? And if we do have a breach, let's be honest, everybody will suffer a breach. There's only two types of organizations. The one who suffered a breach and the organization who don't think they've suffered a breach. But in background, they have. And be prepared so that you can respond in a correct manner for your organization. And hopefully, as we walk through today, we'll help demonstrate some of the tools that's available to help you. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Alan, who will run you through the cyber threat landscape in 21. Thank you very much. Alan, over to you. Alan, I think you're still muted.
Thank you, Adriaan. It's great to be on this webinar with Softwerx, who are one of our key partners. The business for us of helping our clients tackle and get on top of cybersecurity is a key area of performance for us. And one of the ways in which we try and help do that is by helping all of our clients and partners have a really good understanding of the challenges that exist in the world of cybersecurity. So we talk of the cyber threat landscape, and one way of thinking of the cyber threat landscape is to look at the year that we've just come out of and to look at it in number terms. So 1.1 billion records breached, 20 billion records leaked and on the internet. When you think that there are only about 7.5 billion people in the world, that's enough for everybody's record to be exposed 3 times over. And when you recognize that quite a lot of the world doesn't have digital access, actually that means most of us have most of our data out on the dark web somewhere 4 or 5 times. Huge increase in the number of records breached, up by 50%. 114% increase in people working remotely since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, which varied a bit, but for the UK, we're really talking about from the 23rd. Average cost for data breach has gone up to nearly $3.9 million. And if you're in the healthcare industry, it's probably about 15 times that, because of the value of all of the data that healthcare organizations have in terms of setting up and executing identity theft. 83% of breaches are caused by internal errors. And internal errors here don't just mean, gosh, I made a mistake and I deleted some data. It means I didn't configure something correctly, a process wasn't set up correctly, somebody didn't know how to report an intrusion. All of those kinds of errors lead to significant breaches. Outside of those typically are cyber attacks. And as you can see on this graph, the volume of cyber attacks has gone up very dramatically, particularly around COVID-19. So whether taking advantage of the reduced security of people working from home or using coronavirus as a search term, knowing that people want to at all times know something more about what's happening, what's going to happen, what might happen, when can we go on holiday. The combination of attacks on infrastructure and phishing attacks all related to coronavirus went up very radically in 2020. Then, of course, on top of cyber threats, we have Brexit from both a UK and an EU perspective. That's jolly interesting, not least because what you've now got is 2 forms of GDPR. You've got EU GDPR applying if you're in the EU or providing services into the EU, and you've got UK GDPR if you're in the UK. Initially, not much divergence between the two, but there are some key basic differences. The scope of EU GDPR is organisations based in the UK, in the EU. The scope of UK GDPR is based in the UK. International transfers are different. So all organisations have to, with effect from the 1st of January, get on with making sure that that simple transition, one of the hundreds and hundreds of regulatory changes organisations have to cope with. So you've got 2 sets of GDPR to comply with. You've got the challenging growth in the cost of data breaches, because leaving the European Union doesn't suddenly mean that you don't have the potential of a 4% regulatory fine. You actually do. And your costs from a data breach start with you can think of the costs of detecting the breach, escalating it, making sure that the right people are deployed to deal with it, the impacts on customers, the legal expenses of reporting the data breach, the loss of referrals, because, hey, you're not safe, we're not sure we should be dealing with you. That plays out in reputational damage, can play out in lower staff morale, particularly if it's staff records that have been breached. And the cost of response after the breach is significant. Typically, the biggest proportion of costs that organizations have dealing with breaches happen in the 12 months after the breach, as they recover, rebuild, re-strengthen, and get their systems back to where they really should have been prior to the breach. You can see that story in all of the main breaches that have taken place last year and so far already in this year. We're only 3 months really into 2021. Mensa was hacked after it failed to secure the passwords of 18,000 members. You would have thought that an organization like Mensa would have been bright enough to realize that password security might be important. Social Larks had a huge data leak exposing data from 200 million social media users. Ethical hackers found a vulnerability at the UN that gave them access to more than 100,000 employee records. And the kind of breaches go on and on. Wentworth, It's a golf club. They had a ransomware attack in January. 4,000 members warned that their personal data might have been compromised. Foxtons, the estate agency, hit by a cyber attack that compromised financial details of 16,000 customers. A hacker accessed the computer systems of a water treatment facility in Florida. And I'm only mentioning that because it made headlines, and the attacker was a pretty inexpert person who was able to take advantage of massively outdated software, and users were able to sit and watch the hacker as she explored what else they could do on the system. But that's in 2021 so far. And those are just some of the incidents making headlines. The volume of attacks, as I said, has gone up so radically, and the range of attacks, or what we call vectors or threat types, are so varied, and so many of them are automated. They're driven by serious organized crime. They're not driven by people who are simply looking for a chance to have a bit of fun. Serious organized crime has the opportunity to make trillions of dollars. Serious organized crime industry is now running at something like about $1 trillion annually. That's a pretty big industry. Phishing, very sophisticated now. The old-fashioned phishing stuff, which you could spot because, hey, the spelling was bad and the images were bad, that still exists, but good phishing attacks, very difficult to tell from, to identify them from the real thing. Criminals will buy URLs that look exactly like yours. They'll deploy attacks that most people, unless they're properly trained, won't spot. Business email compromise, such an easy form of attack. Chief executive says, send £5,000 to this partner, they need it urgently. Buy £800 worth of Amazon vouchers, please, for the sales team. All of those kind of social engineering attacks, massively growing. Weak passwords, password spraying attack. As I said, if there's 20 billion records compromised in a year, then lots of us have passwords, and most people use the same password on more than one account. Criminals know that, which is why they love it. Malicious software, particularly ransomware, escalating hugely, particularly with the kind of double dip options clients have with ransomware. Ransom your systems, steal your records, and if you pay, that's good. If not, and even if you do, they'll sell the records. Poorly managed patches is how they get in. Vulnerabilities in your cloud setup, insider threats, insecure configurations, all key areas, particularly the technical areas that are fundamental to protecting yourself from attack. And so mitigating risk, a number of things that you should do. You should be making sure that you have cybersecurity staff, that they're properly trained, they know how to deal with the range of issues that they have coming, they're kept up to date. You need to have staff undergo regular staff awareness training, and where phishing is concerned, more than annual. You should probably be doing that on a quarterly basis so that you're making people aware of the changing look and feel of phishing attacks. You need to do risk assessments. You need to do risk assessments at least once a year. You should be doing them whenever you make changes to the network, whenever there are changes in your threat environment. You should be doing vulnerability scans and penetration testing on a monthly and quarterly basis. You should be finding the vulnerabilities before the attackers do. And of course, you should be reviewing policies and procedures to make sure that you are staying on top of all of the emerging gaps and you're ensuring that the policies you've designed are implemented as you should be. So against that background, a couple of areas that from an IT governance point of view, you should be thinking about in terms of dealing with those threats. And these are options you get at through Softwerx. Softwerx is, as I said, our partner, and we partner with them to bring Cyber Essentials, which is a UK government scheme designed to deal with something like 80% of internet-borne threats. It's a very simple, basic level that focuses on 5 key control areas for organizations. It's not just aimed, as it was originally, at small businesses, but at all organizations. And you should think of Cyber Essentials as a minimum cyber hygiene element. The 5 areas which, if you're breached, you kind of, hey, in any one of these areas, you just weren't paying attention. It's a very clear and straightforward standard. You go through a process to become certified. You need to fill in a questionnaire. Softwerx and IT Governance can help with all of that, but it can also not only make you secure, it can help you win business. It's certainly a prerequisite for government contracts. It can help the rest of your customers see that you're taking your security seriously. Increasingly, it will give you access to good quality cyber insurance, which is designed around the fact that you have core controls in place, and will enable you to step up into more complex standards, the ones that are looked for both from managements and regulators from the perspective of demonstrating that you've got cybersecurity built in across the whole of the organization, but also from a perspective of large customers who are looking for evidence that the way in which you govern and deal with cybersecurity is as it should be. So Cyber Essentials, as I said, we are one of the leading certification bodies in the UK, more than 5,000 certificates. We've been a CB ever since the scheme came out. Our services are designed to give, working with our partners and our clients, end-to-end support. We've got unrivaled expertise in cybersecurity and cybersecurity management. We're able to deliver a very straightforward off-the-shelf solution. We can also tailor solutions for clients. We've got bundles that will enable you to access minimum support, more complex support, and our consultants are really competent, lots of experience in delivering Cyber Essentials, and particularly Cyber Essentials Plus, which is the step up from Cyber Essentials, and which is the step most organizations either go to after Cyber Essentials or increasingly first off, because it's what gives you a much greater level of security and understanding of your level of security. The second kind of core area that should be fundamental to what you do is penetration testing. While Cyber Essentials is an annual certification requirement, vulnerability scanning, which is looking for emerging vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities are identified in their thousands every day. Increasingly, vulnerabilities are found and are attacked before vendors have a chance to deploy patches. Penetration testing is a combination of vulnerability scanning that looks for weaknesses before a hacker can find them. It's driven by a combination of automated processes and intelligent, highly experienced ethical hackers who know what hackers are looking to do, and they'll have a look to identify in your internet-facing infrastructure where the vulnerabilities are and how the vulnerabilities can be linked together by hackers to get deeper inside your network, and we'll be able to identify, therefore, critical vulnerabilities that need dealing with and those that you can afford to delay dealing with. A good outsider perspective on the quality of security from a management point of view, penetration testing is a way of helping be sure that the IT infrastructure, security and compliance teams are really on top of their jobs. And because penetration testers are constantly increasing their range of attacks and skills in line with what they see going on in the real world, you know that what you're getting is something that is relevant for the environment in which you're operating today. Penetration testing is a complete key part of complying with the requirements of GDPR. GDPR says you have to deploy appropriate technical and organizational controls to protect the personal data you have, taking account of the state of the art. That's a pretty clear statement that you need to be testing security right now. It's a organizational control, a technical control, taking account of the state of the art. That's talking about the common current state of attack technology and cyber criminal skills and competence. It's a requirement of international standards like ISO 27001, and of course it's an expectation built into PCI compliance for payment card processing. And penetration testing, like all cybersecurity, while it has an initial outlay, you should think of simply as an investment. It saves money in the long run. The cost of recovering from a data breach and then putting in place the systems that you should have had is way, way more than the cost of doing the job properly in the first place. So from IT governance, Cyber Essentials, penetration testing, think of those as core, but we can help as I said, through Softwerx. With GDPR compliance, we have a law business, we have a privacy by design team, we help organizations with business continuity management, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, rolling into PCI compliance. In our technical services team, we have a huge array of staff awareness courses which can help train people around GDPR, phishing, PCI. We can help with documentation, policy, procedures. We can deliver completely bespoke and tailored consultancy projects for you. And of course, if you want beach reading, and hopefully coming up is the opportunity to go to a beach somewhere through IT Governance Publishing. Our publishing business is a fascinating array of books on subjects related to cybersecurity and governance. So that's it from me, folks. I hand you now back to Adriaan.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So from point of view, I'm just going to share my screen and then we can take it from there. So thank you very much. So what we want to do is understand how we can use and adhere to these regulations that this keeps coming out, and how we can actually use our Microsoft first approach in improving our data security and understanding what we can do to show, as mentioned, you've got to have policies, procedures, and show that you are actually adhering to those policies. So the whole idea with a Microsoft first approach is really, how do we deal with the information? Well, firstly, you've got to understand, what data do you have? What information do you hold? How much of your data is critical to the business? How much of it's potentially data that falls under the category of GDPR? What data is commercially sensitive? And then understanding, how can we go ahead and protect that data? Because protecting that information is very important. So, for example, shall we encrypt this document? That means that when it leaves the business, nobody outside the organization can actually open this piece of data or this file or this access these records. Then as well, actually put some sort of data loss protection in place. Let the system help your users to secure the data, because let's be honest, most users don't want to be malicious. They just want to share some information, and occasionally they might share a document that includes credit card details or medical records by accident. It's not intentional. They just wanted to pass the information without actually knowing what's in the document. With AI and this Microsoft and the systems, they can look at the document and actually notify the user proactively that we've detected a credit card number, or we've detected some personal identifiable information. We should really protect it, and are you actually sure this needs to be sent in clear text to somebody outside the organization? And all of these controls can be put in place. And then lastly, it is actually govern your data, discover the information, delete the information you don't need, or if you have a subject access request, retrieve the information, but really start managing your data and make sure that you stay compliant with the information that's provided. And what we'll do now is just run through some of the tools that's available. It's not the full list. If we cover everything off, we'll probably be here for days from a point of view. So this is going to be a whirlwind just through some of the basics that's available. And then as part of the Q&A, we'll cover up some basic security information that I would suggest everybody implements. So firstly, I would say, look at Microsoft Information Protection. So a lot of organizations previously don't know that Microsoft Information exists. What this will actually do is help set retention inside your organization. It can look at all of the data that you have, label that information, set how long that documents can be kept, but also actually start classifying that information. For example, is it personal information? Is it confidential? Is it HR confidential files? And help you understand the data that you have and start labeling it. And just by labeling the organization, you can set some sort of behavior. For example, the data can be shared outside the business, or the data cannot be shared outside the business. But by labeling it, you can help the system look for this information. So a good example would be, you might have labeled the document as confidential HR, and somebody tries to mail the document out. The email system will see that the document's been labeled and actually prevent it from being sent outside of the organization, because the behavior that's set on that specific label is, do not let this data leave the organization, as an example. So it's understanding what there is, and what, by leveraging things like my MCAS, you can also extend that this data will look at other cloud applications that your users might be using, for example, like Dropbox or one of the various sales tools that's out there, and prevent them from accidentally uploading information that could be quite sensitive to into a portal that's outside of your control. Then, as I mentioned, is to get the data loss prevention. And what this will do is you can block messages. You can bring up notifications that give some policy tips that tells the user, please be aware, you've just currently writing an email to an external person, and it includes credit card or medical information. And what this helps is, you can set the system up to do all of this automatically. And what is very good is that Microsoft has included about 90 different types of sensitive information out of the box. The classification the trainers that's in there is already configured. It's out the box. You don't need to do anything. Yes, you can go and sort out your own trainers if you need to, or classifications. That is available, but out the box, there's more than 90 that's available. So for most organizations, for most businesses, what is included by default is enough to help organizations to cope with the data. And more importantly, it's not just you preventing it, it's actually helping you educate and guide your users. And I think this is a big thing we got to concentrate on, that users aren't always trying to be malicious. We are all human, we do make mistakes. And so let's leverage the technology to help the users not to be complacent or accidentally becoming the data leak in your organization. And then, as we mentioned, we talked about the classifications, I touched on it, but what is very interesting is, as more and more organizations are moving away from the traditional file shares and moving the data into the cloud, we are finding that the information exists in SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, Teams. But what this has enabled organizations to do is go and discover all of that data, have that information available, make sure that we can look through all those documents and classify them for the organization proactively. So let's go and protect them. Because what has also been quite interesting, as organizations migrate to the cloud, we come to a term that we call security by obscurity, because data was on the systems that nobody knew existed previously. It was stored in a shared folder. It was sitting there dormant, just ready for somebody to access one day, but it was actually secure because nobody really went and looked for it. Now that the data is in the cloud and indexed, it becomes a lot more easy to discover that information, which means that if you do not actually govern your records intelligently, that the ability to discover that information becomes a lot easier. And what we have seen is where individuals has transferred data into SharePoint, for example, or Teams, and they've just done the traditional lift and shift, which is not recommended. And then suddenly users start finding personal information that is supposed to have been secured, including payrolls, including medical records, just purely because nobody actually knew it existed when it was transitioned. And this is one of the challenges that organizations is finding. So leverage the classifications, label the data, look at the type of information in there, and then enforce your policies around that information. So, for example, we will retain the data for 7 years. After 7 years, delete it. Because, again, the amount of time we see the message, we are keeping the data just in case, or nobody really knows why we have the data, so we rather not delete it to be safe. Actually, you've got a duty of care to secure that information. So do think about why do we have data? Why do we really need the data? And can we actually just get rid of it, or at the minimum encrypt it so that it just can't be shared externally? Then we look at insider risk management, and what this is actually doing. It links into your own organization's HR system, in your own looking at the user activity. So, for example, it depends on your policies. You might have a policy that you're going to allow data to be transferred to a USB drive, or actually we'll allow data that's not been classified to be copied to a USB drive, but anything that's classed as confidential or highly confidential, we do not allow. So you can stop the users from downloading it. Or a good example that we also see with insider risk, what the real world scenario is, on a Friday night, I download 50 documents as classed as confidential to USB drive, but it's part of my job description, so I'm allowed to do that. And then Monday morning, I walk into HR and hand in my resignation. HR updates the fact that I've resigned and that I'm working my notice, so the system will immediately take a closer look at my behavior, but it will also understand that, hold on, I accessed and downloaded a significant amount of data on a Friday night, which I don't normally do, and I resigned on Monday. Maybe we will notify and escalate this to our compliance manager or legal team or HR team to investigate further, because that was abnormal behavior combined with the fact that I've just handed in my resignation probably means that somebody needs to come and have a talk to me to say, can we just understand why you downloaded all this commercially sensitive information that you can potentially take to a competitor, for example. And it's being able to leverage these type of technology to help organizations manage that insider risk, because yes, there's as was mentioned earlier, it is the accidental insider risk, but there's also the malicious insider risk where people want to take data or take information. So have a look at that more, understand how it potentially can help your organization, because especially for the larger international organizations we deal with, this is a feature that they are more and more interested in to help them deal with the risks around the users and the staff inside the organization. Then what has also come to light is with a subject access request or individuals litigations that is happening, is we're getting more and more requests to do a discovery. And what organizations are aware of, you can run what we call the basic e-discovery that's available across most tenants, but the Microsoft also got a feature called Advanced e-discovery, which will help you retrieve information, look at the type of data there is, extract more detailed queries, reduce the data that you potentially have to share, exclude, for example, communications with your lawyers, because that is you don't need to share that, for example, as part of a subject access request if you're in part of a litigation, for example, or because that is client confidentiality between you and the lawyer. So there's a lot of information that can be put in place. You can also very quickly look at the data, look at the information, understand how it's related. Is there similar information that exists? Because what a lot of organizations don't realize, and it's quite interesting when I do go and have this chat with organizations, is by default, your team's messages are all recorded. You might not remember that you've written what you've written 5 months ago or 7 months ago, but it's all there. It can all be searched. It can all be retrieved. And unless you're making those changes to exclude that, when we run the e-discovery, all those conversations will come back and need to be shared potentially as part of a subject access request. And it's being aware that of the capabilities, the power of running these discoveries, how much it can help your organization reduce the time you spend trying to find the information or when you need to investigate a incident. It just really helps you with your data compliance. And as I say, happy to take questions on this, but we'll move on now. And then lastly, is your compliance management. What a lot of organizations don't realize is Microsoft has brought out a compliance manager tool that will let you help you with demonstrating all the controls in GDPR, ISO 27001, NIST, all of the usual suspects that's out there, for example, HIPAA, the rest of them, SOC 2, and you can very quickly demonstrate your compliance against these controls. Have you implemented these controls? Do they exist? How often have you assessed them? Who did you assign the task to? And you can constantly keep assigning the task so you can manage your compliance with ISO 27001, etc. very quickly from a point of view to show that you are continuously dealing with it. And what's really nice, by moving to 365, Microsoft takes care of a lot of the controls, what are called the physical controls, where you need to take care of the security and compliance around those controls inside the organization. And some of them might just be policies and procedures, which you can upload and attach. But you can also create your own custom templates. So for example, if you were to run the ISO 27001 controls, you can do that, but those can be extended as well if you needed to run some sort of internal controls against this. But the compliance manager will then give you a score, show you how you're doing, and have a way that you can report to your senior management team how compliant you are from a point of view of dealing with ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials, etc. But again, have a look at it, because a lot of organizations don't even know that it exists inside of Microsoft. And again, you do get access depending on the right license, and I'm going to come back to that because it does catch a few people out. And then just lastly, as we take the summary away, it would be, I do want to mention a few messages around security as well. Remember that Office 365 is a public cloud. It is available. It's only as secure as you make it. As we mentioned, weak passwords is normally one of the most common breaches we see when people deal with Office 365. So a few recommendations is make sure that you've got MFA turned on. Ensure that you've got advanced audit, because if you do suffer a breach, it's so useful to know what emails has been accessed, what queries that potentially the criminal has run. For example, search SharePoint for data on staff and what they've searched for in OneDrive and email. So it's just be aware of that. And lastly, do remember, Office 365 is not backed up. It's your responsibility to back up your data. The data in there is kept for a limited time. So if it's deleted, if it's compromised, if it's removed, it will be gone after a certain period of time. And for some users, that's for some of the features, it's 30 days. Some goes into a recycle bin for 6 months, but it depends on the type of data that you have. So do make sure you back it up, because that is always your last line of defense if you had a serious incident and you need to roll back to a certain point in time. And so in summary is, just understand the risks, understand your regulatory requirements, leverage your Microsoft investment, and as we said, get Cyber Essentials as a minimum. It's the minimum standard that every organization, irrelevant of the size of the business, should obtain at all stages. Thank you. And what I'm going to do now is just hand over to Patrick to see if there's any questions, and give everybody a chance to ask some questions either to Alan and myself, and we'll do our best to address them if we have any.
Thanks very much. We'll just give people a moment to pop some questions into the panel. So just give it another moment. So we don't have any questions at this stage, but I think we've been able to cover everything that we wanted to. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone for joining us. Thank you very much to Alan as well for joining, and to IT Governance. And you can keep up to date with our upcoming events on the Softwerx page under webinars, as well as our news section. And we'd also really appreciate your feedback. There's a link to a short survey, and we'd love it if you could fill that out. It really helps us to just improve the kind of topics and content that we present for next time. So you'll find a link to that there. And what we can also do is post something regarding our discovery workshop in the chat panel. I've actually just seen a couple of questions have come through, Adriaan and Alan. So we've got a question from Craig, and he's asking, do you have any comment on the recent news regarding the shift to state-backed hacking? I think this could be for you, Alan.
It's not a recent shift. Nation states have been involved in supporting hacking activity for years. From the early days of the internet, you could have gone to any Secret Service organization in the world and you would have found hidden away in their marketing something which said, if you give us some money, we can probably go and find any data you want, which was an invitation to pay them to hack. So cyber offensive capabilities as well as cyber defensive capabilities are kind of part of what every government has in place. In some governments, like particularly Russia, China, and North Korea, here in the West, we talk a lot about the extent to which the state backs cyber attacks. There is unquestionably a Chinese cyber activity. You can see their traffic coming out of their offices between, in working hours and not at weekends. Russia has managed to get a lot of headlines for some of the work it's done in the US and elsewhere, but that kind of cyber offensive capability is absolutely normal. Believe it, the UK, US, they all have their own capabilities. Big attacks on Iran have been triggered by a combination of the US and Israeli cyber offense teams. What happens, of course, is that cyber criminals have much more flexibility about what they can go after than do governments. So there's a big grey area between the work of cyber crime and the work of nation states, with a whole lot of attack software finding its way out of the hands of nation states that develop it into the hands of cyber criminals, either deliberately or because of people transitioning between the two areas of employment. And what we see right now is cybercrime, particularly in the advanced persistent threat groups, the highly organized cybercrime groups, is a level of sophistication which is not that far short of what most of the nation states can do. North Korea is normally thought to be processing something like about $1 billion a year of business through state-backed hacking, through cybercrime. If you blockade a country, it's going to find ways of getting money otherwise. So as I said, it's not a recent thing, the shift to state backing of hacking. State-backed cybercrime, while it sounds as though it's a contradiction in terms, has been going on for a long time and just gets more and more effective and impactful.
Okay, thank you, Alan. We've got another question there for Adriaan here. This is about Microsoft Compliance Manager, and the question is that enabled by default? And if not, how is it enabled?
It is enabled now through the through your compliance screen. It is enabled by default. You get some of the I think you get about 3 or 4 reports that you get access to. The baseline report you get access to by default. You just need to go log in, go to Compliance Manager, go and add the template and start assessing your organizations against that template from a point of view. If you want to use any of the advanced templates, you do need some of the compliance licenses to enable that. So you need to move up to your M365 E5 or Compliance E5, for example. But have a look at the reports. There's about 5 or 6 that they give you. I'm doing this from memory because it keeps changing, that they give you free. And if you want to use any of their more advanced reports, then you do need to as I say, have the right license. But if you look in Compliance Manager, it's moved. Every company has access to it. They keep moving the screens. They're trying to bring it all under compliance now. Otherwise, there was also the Compliance Manager that you could just look at, and it will take you to the Compliance Manager portal. But that should now have moved into your admin center over the last, I think it's the last 2 months that they've moved it all into the admin center.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much, Adriaan. And there's at this stage one more question. This one I believe would be for Alan. How relevant is Cyber Essentials for organisations outside the UK, namely the EU?
Well, Cyber Essentials is relevant for any organisation anywhere in the world, in that it is a mechanism for testing that you have in place the 5 basic controls which deal with 80% of cyber threats. The fact that it's a UK government and National Cybersecurity Centre backed certification doesn't prohibit organisations anywhere else in the world from applying for and achieving certification. The process is as easy for an EU organisation as it is for a UK organisation. There is absolutely no geographic restriction. And so from the perspective of I'd like, as a management, to have some assurance that we've got the basics under control. I think it's unbeatable. The fact that it's not yet widely known outside of the UK or more broadly across the EU is a minor matter. We already have clients in Ireland, in Benelux, in France, in Germany, in elsewhere who've seen the benefits to them, either because they're applying for contracts in the UK where it's much better known, or simply because they are leaders in their sectors and see it as a way of getting a basic and externally tested form of cybersecurity controls in place. So yes, it's completely relevant for anybody anywhere in the world.
Okay, thanks very much. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. We would just like to thank you very much for joining us, and we would look forward to seeing you at any of our future events, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.